The wind howled through the broken towers of the ancient city that once touched the clouds. Its voice was cold and hollow, carrying the dust of 1,000 dead dreams. Beneath the fractured sky walked a man in tattered armor, his boots sinking into the ash that had replaced soil long ago. His name was Kale, the last recorded survivor of Earth's final defense unit. His visor flickered with dying light, and his breathing echoed against the silence like a lonely machine refusing to die. Every step he took sent a faint echo across the ruins. The streets were filled with skeletons of machines that once served men, now rusted and broken by time. He stopped before a statue half buried in dust, a figure of an ancient hero holding a sword toward the heavens. The words carved at its base were almost unreadable, but Kale knew them by heart. They spoke of courage, of unity, and of hope that no longer existed. Kale lifted his gaze to the distant horizon, where the light of the twin moons painted the world in a pale glow. There, beyond the ruins, beyond the fields of twisted steel and shattered glass, stood the camp of his enemy, the alien warrior, the one they called Serath of the Crimson Order. He had never met her in person, but her legend was enough to fill even the strongest heart with unease. She was said to be the one who led the assault that ended the human cities, a being of flawless strength and terrifying grace. Yet Kale had no choice. His mission was clear. Find her, face her, end what was left of this war. He adjusted the straps on his armor and began to walk toward the alien encampment. The night was alive with faint whispers, the sound of wind pushing through hollow structures. In the distance, a tower collapsed under its own weight, releasing a cloud of dust that danced under the moonlight, like ghosts rising from their graves. Kale reached the edge of the city and stopped beside an old transport vehicle half melted by plasma fire. He set his rifle down and opened his rations, chewing dry food that tasted of nothing. His hands were shaking not from hunger but from exhaustion. He had been wandering for days. Alone since his unit had fallen in the last battle at Meridian Canyon, he closed his eyes and remembered their faces. Men and women who had laughed beside him, who had promised to rebuild Earth once the war was over. But the war had not ended. It had merely slowed to silence, a silence filled with dust ruins and ghosts. When he opened his eyes again, the first light of dawn was rising. A faint golden hue painted the ruins, and he saw her silhouette for the first time. Serath. She stood upon a broken tower, her silver armor reflecting the sun. Her long, dark hair flowed with the wind, and her weapon, a curved blade of living metal, pulsed with faint red light. She did not move, yet Kyle could feel her gaze pierce the distance between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. Kale stepped forward. His voice was hoarse from disuse. "You are the one who destroyed Meridian." Her reply came soft but clear. "And you are the one who refused to die." Their words carried across the wasteland like echoes of a forgotten age. She leaped from the tower landing in a swirl of dust. Her movements were too graceful, too precise to belong to anything human. As she approached, Kale gripped his weapon tighter. His suit registered her energy signature, and a warning blinked across his visor. Power level unknown. Threat? Extreme. "Why do you still fight?" she asked, stopping a few meters from him. Her eyes were strange, a deep violet that shimmered with faint inner light. "Your world is gone. Your kind is gone. What do you hope to achieve by standing here alone?" Kyle's voice trembled, but his will did not. "You would not understand. You never had a world to lose." Serath tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "We fought to survive just as you did. Do not pretend your people were innocent." Kale said nothing. He simply raised his weapon. The moment stretched thin and time seemed to pause. Then light exploded as plasma and steel met. The battle began with fury that shook the earth. Kale fired round after round, each blast cutting through the air with a scream of energy, but Serath moved like lightning, her blade deflecting each shot. She rushed forward, and the ground cracked beneath her steps. Kale rolled aside and unleashed a grenade that burst in a wave of blue fire. Serath was thrown back, her armor scorched, but she landed on her feet. Her eyes burned brighter now. She slashed her weapon across the air, sending an arc of red energy that tore through the ruins behind Kale. He ducked, barely avoiding death, and countered with his knife, striking close. For a brief second, their Blades met, and he saw her face through the glare of fire and dust. She was not a monster. She was alive. Her expression was fierce, but filled with something deeper, something almost sorrowful. Their weapons locked. She whispered between gritted teeth, "You cannot win!" Kyle pushed harder. "Then I will die trying." The force of their clash sent both flying back. Kale hit the ground hard, his armor cracking. Pain surged through his ribs, but he forced himself up again. Sarath stood breathing heavily, small trails of smoke rising from her armor. Neither moved for a moment. The ruins around them glowed faintly from the aftermath of energy discharge. Then Kale spoke again, his tone calmer. "If you truly wished to kill me, you would have done so already." Sarath's gaze softened slightly. "You are observant. I have fought many of your kind. None like you. Most begged for mercy. You do not." Kyle lowered his weapon a little. "Mercy died when the first city burned." Sarath looked away for a heartbeat, then back at him. "Maybe it did. Yet I am tired of war. Our orders are gone. Our commander's dead. The stars we fought for are silent. Tell me, human, what is left worth fighting for?" Kale's voice was quiet. "Memory." The word hung in the air, heavy and honest. Sarath blinked slowly, as if the meaning struck her. "Memory. Yes," Kale said. "To remember what we were. To make sure it is not forgotten." For the first time, Sarath did not raise her weapon. She simply stood there looking at the human who refused to fall. The sunlight rose higher, bathing the broken world in a pale glow that looked almost like peace. They stood among ruins that had once been home to billions now silent, witnesses to the last meeting of two, warriors from opposite ends of a dead war, but peace would not hold for long. Far beyond the horizon, machines were waking ancient sentinels left behind by both races during the final days. Kale's visor flickered with new signals, dozens of them moving. Power levels rising? Sarath turned her head as her armor pulsed faintly red again. "They are coming. The old defense units, machines with no master." Kale nodded. "Then we are both targets." Sarath's eyes met his once more. "Strange. Enemies one moment, allies the next." Kale tightened his grip on his weapon. "Maybe that is the only way the world can begin again." The sound of metal footsteps echoed through the distance. The sky darkened as the sentinels marched through the ruins, their eyes glowing blue. Kyle and Sarath stood side by side for the first time, their weapons humming in unison. The war was not over. But something had changed. The ruins of the fallen world were about to witness a new kind of battle, one fought not between species but against the machines of the past. And in that moment, neither human nor alien felt alone. The air trembled as the first sentinel came into view. It was a massive creature of steel and ancient code, its body forged from the wreckage of fallen cities, its face featureless, yet alive with blue fire. Behind it, dozens more rose from the shadows of broken towers, their steps shaking the ground. The world that had fallen now awakened its forgotten guardians, and they did not care who had once ruled it. Human or alien, both were intruders now. Kale lifted his rifle and felt the familiar hum of the weapon in his hands. Sarath stood beside him, her sword glowing with pulsing red veins of light that looked almost alive. The ground cracked beneath their feet as the sentinels advanced. The wind carried the faint hum of forgotten songs, the echoes of machines that once served mankind now turned into death. Kale spoke without looking at her. "If you plan to run, now is the time." Sarath's voice was steady and low. "I do not run. I face what comes," Kale smiled weakly. "Then we fight together." She turned to him, her violet eyes shining faintly. "Together." The first sentinel lunged forward, firing a stream of plasma that tore through the ruins. Kale dove behind a chunk of concrete and fired back his shot, striking the sentinel's armor, leaving glowing scars. Sarath leapt high, her blade slicing through the air and striking the machine's head. Sparks burst like falling stars, and the sentinel crashed to the ground, sending a wave of dust across the battlefield. More followed. Dozens of glowing eyes in the smoke. Kale moved with precision, switching between rifle and blade, his armor, warning him of rising heat. The machines were adapting, learning with every second. One sentinel extended metallic limbs that shot toward him like spears. Kale rolled aside, but one grazed his shoulder, tearing a deep wound through the plating. Sarath landed near him, her armor cracked, but her movement still swift. "They are endless," Kale gritted his teeth. "Then we end them first." They fought side by side, each move an unspoken rhythm between soldier and warrior. Kale's shots weakened their shields, while Sarath's blade carved through the exposed cores. The ground became littered with burning wrecks, the air thick with smoke and the faint smell of ozone. When the last of the sentinels fell, silence returned for a brief, fragile moment. Kale leaned against a broken wall, breathing hard, his armor flickering with failing power. Sarath stood beside him, wiping black dust from her blade. Her gaze swept the battlefield. "It seems the world still remembers how to fight," she said quietly. Kale nodded, his voice faint. "So do we," but the silence did not last. The sky began to glow with faint red lines that formed a grid across the horizon. The ancient defense system buried deep beneath the earth had awakened. A voice echoed faintly from nowhere and everywhere at once. It spoke in a language long forgotten, but Kale understood enough to know it was a warning. Sarath's expression darkened. "The planet's core systems are still alive. If they reactivate completely, they will erase everything." Kale stared at the glowing sky. "Then we stop it." She turned to him with disbelief. "You cannot stop the core. It was built to survive the death of worlds. Not even your greatest weapons could destroy it." Kyle looked down at his trembling hands. "Maybe not. But there must be a control node, something to shut it down." Sarath hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "There is one place. The Obsidian Spire. It lies in the heart of this continent. It is where the first contact between your people and mine began. If the systems still function, that is where they will be controlled." Kale tightened his armor straps and stood. "Then that's where we go." They began their journey through the ruins that stretched for miles. The world was a wasteland of bones and machines, yet beneath the death there was strange beauty. Vines of silver plant life had begun to grow through the cracks of metal. Shards of old satellites glittered like stars on the ground. It was as if the planet was trying to heal itself slowly, painfully, but surely. As they walked, Kyle looked at Sarath. Her steps were silent, her face calm, but there was a shadow in her eyes. "You fought to destroy us," he said quietly. "Why help me now?" She did not look at him. "I fought because I was ordered to. We believed humanity would never stop expanding, never stop consuming. Our leader said it was mercy to end your rule before you ended ours. But when I stood among your cities, when I saw your people, I began to doubt. We were told you were monsters, yet the ones I killed bled like I do, feared like I do. I began to understand too late." Kale said nothing for a while. Then softly he replied, "We were not innocent either. We built the machines that burned the stars. We created weapons that killed without thought. Maybe we both deserved the end that came." Sarath looked toward the distant mountains. "Maybe, but we are still here." The journey took days. They crossed fields of glass where cities had once stood, deserts filled with metallic sand that glowed faintly at night, and forests of twisted roots that grew around ancient machines. At night, they camped beneath the shattered moonlight. Kyle would light a small fire, and they would share the last of his rations. Once Kyle asked her about her homeworld. She spoke of skies filled with twin suns, of oceans that sang, and of great crystalline towers that shone brighter than lightning. Her voice trembled slightly when she said her people could no longer return there. The war had destroyed more than just Earth. It had broken their own sun. When Kale told her of Earth's seas, of its mountains, and the laughter of children, she listened in silence. At one point, he saw her eyes glisten, though she turned away quickly. On the fifth day, they reached the Obsidian Spire. It rose from the ground, like a black needle piercing the clouds, its surface, smooth and alive with faint blue light. The air around it was thick with static. Kale placed his hand on the surface and felt a pulse like a heartbeat. "It's still active," Sarath nodded. "We must reach the core chamber." They entered through a massive gate half open. Inside the spire was a labyrinth of corridors filled with the hum of ancient power. Symbols of both human and alien design glowed faintly along the walls. It was strange to see them together. Once enemies now forever joined in ruin, they descended for hours until they reached a vast chamber filled with light. In the center stood a machine shaped like a heart suspended in energy. It pulsed slowly, each beat sending waves of power through the structure. "This is it," Sarath whispered. "The planetary control core." Kyle approached carefully. "Can we shut it down?" Sarath studied the glowing runes. "Yes, but it will not let us. It is programmed to destroy intruders. It will fight back." Kale looked at her. "Then we fight again." Before she could answer, the ground shook. The air shimmered, and from the walls emerged forms made of light and metal, the echoes of ancient warriors recreated by the system's memory. They moved in silence, their bodies shifting between shapes human and alien both. Sarath drew her sword. "It remembers us." Kyle raised his rifle. "Then we remind it we are still alive." The battle inside the core chamber was chaos. The echoes attacked with perfect coordination, beams of energy slicing through the air. Kale ducked behind cover, firing at the glowing forms, while Sarath moved like a storm, her blade cutting through their luminous bodies. Every time one fell, another rose from the light. Kale was hit by a blast that threw him back. His armor failed and pain burned across his chest. Sarath rushed to him, blocking another strike meant for his head. Her sword shattered under the force, but she did not fall. Instead, she drove the broken blade into the glowing enemy's chest and tore it apart. When the last of the echoes vanished, the core pulsed, brighter, its light turning crimson. Sarath fell to her knees, clutching her side. Kale crawled to her. "You're hurt." She shook her head weakly. "It is nothing. We must finish this." Kyle reached the console and saw a sequence flashing across the surface. He recognized the old Earth code combined with alien symbols. "It needs 2 inputs. 1 human, 1 alien. It's built to require both." Sarath looked up at him, her breathing shallow. "Then do it." He placed his hand on one side of the console and she placed hers on the other. The machine reacted instantly, glowing with a surge of white light. Voices echoed through the chamber, memories of the past, of soldiers and children, of laughter and screams. Then the light dimmed. The hum stopped. The world fell silent. Kale opened his eyes. The glow of the core was gone. The system had shut down. The planet was quiet again. Sarath sat against the wall, her eyes half closed. Kale knelt beside her. "It's over," she smiled faintly. "Perhaps the world will breathe again." Kyle hesitated. "You can rest now." Her hand reached up weakly and touched his cheek. "Do not forget what we did here. Tell your stars that an alien and a human saved what was left." Kale gripped her hand. "I will." Her eyes closed slowly and she whispered something too soft to hear. Then she was still. Kale sat there for a long time, listening to the silence. Outside the spire, the clouds began to part, revealing sunlight that had not touched the land in centuries. The ruins glowed faintly as green began to spread across the wasteland. The planet was healing. He buried Sarath beneath the roots of a crystal tree that had begun to grow near the spire. On her grave, he placed the broken half of her sword. Then he turned to the horizon. The world was quiet but alive. He whispered into the wind. "We were enemies once. Now we are both its children." And with that, the last human survivor walked into the light of a reborn world, carrying with him the memory of an alien warrior who had fought not to conquer but to save, the ruins of the Fail.